guys, welcome back to my channel. My name is Georgia and today I'm going to show you how to make the beautiful crochet version of the mohair sweater. It's not actually mohair though, this is Drops Designs brushed alpaca silk, but it obviously gives off like a really similar effect to mohair. There is a knit version of this tutorial which you can see here, and if you want to watch that version instead, then I'll leave that linked down below. Also, if you prefer PDF versions of patterns, so you prefer like to read what to do instead of watch what to do, then I'll leave the PDF version down below linked in the description as well. So if you're a beginner crocheter, this pattern is so easy. The hardest part is working with a single strand of like mohair yarn, because it can get a bit kind of like tangled and you do have to crochet loosely, otherwise it just turns out being a big mess. But the actual design of the jumper is really easy. There's no decreases, there's no increases. We basically just crochet 4 rectangles and then join them together. I'll leave the gauge and the sizing info on the screen now for you, so you can pause the video and see which one will be best for you. If you have any questions throughout the pattern, please feel free to leave them in a comment and I'll get back to you as quickly as I can. Also, if you make this jumper, do not forget to tag me on socials. I absolutely love seeing what you make, seeing your version of things, and it just absolutely makes my day. If you like the video, don't forget to give it a thumbs up. Subscribe if you want to stick around for more tutorials from me, but without any more babbling, let's get crafting. Okay, so you're going to need some yarn. I'm using this Drops brushed alpaca silk, which I would really recommend because it's actually really budget friendly. If you're in the UK, you can get this from Wool Warehouse and probably Love Crafts as well, but I love Wool Warehouse. So, and you can see this recommends a 5mm needle or hook, and you can see the gauge swatch there just so that you know you can get kind of a similar yarn, but it's like a Aran/worsted weight yarn. Even though it's really thin, it's classed as an Aran/worsted weight yarn. So if you get some sort of mohair or brushed alpaca silk or something like that that is Aran or worsted weight, you're going to need some scissors. Do excuse that is actually dough from where I baked some bread. Then you need a couple of stitch markers. I'm just using bobby pins. Then you also need your yarn needle. Mine is in a bit of a state there. You need a measuring tape, and you also need your crochet hook. I'm using 8mm, but either use an 8mm hook or whatever size hook you need to obtain the gauge. So as always, we're going to grab our yarn and we're going to start off with a slip knot. We need to make our beginning chain, and I'll leave how many you should chain on the screen depending on what size you're doing. So I did just leave a little note there to chain loosely, and that goes throughout this whole pattern. We don't want to crochet too tightly because this kind of yarn, it just ends up in a big mess and it gets really hard to work with. So really try and remember that throughout this pattern. Okay, so I have my beautiful chain, and now we're going to single crochet in the second chain from the hook. And you can see I'm trying not to apply any tension. I'm not pulling after each stitch, and you're just going to continue to single crochet in each stitch along. This is what it should start to look like. Just continue that across your chain. Okay, so you've done row 1 of your front panel. So now we're going to chain 1 and turn our work. Now we're going to go into the next stitch. So this is the first stitch and that chain counts as the first stitch. And then we're going to single crochet into the second stitch. That means that the chain 1 counts as a stitch, and that goes throughout this pattern. If you prefer to do it in a different way, then please feel free to do that. But the idea is that you have the same amount of stitches across each row and you don't decrease or increase. I just prefer to do it so that the beginning chain counts as a stitch. I find that easier. Some people don't like doing that, so just do whatever you prefer. You're going to continue to single crochet across this row, and that will be row 2 done. So this is what the work looks like after you've done 2 rows. And now we're just going to keep repeating that row 2 that we just did. So we're going to chain 1 and turn our work. Then we're going to single crochet in the next stitch and then all the way across the row. And then all you're going to do is keep repeating that. So for every row, you just chain 1, turn, single crochet across the row, and you're just going to keep repeating that until your work measures however much it says on the screen. Please make sure you're not accidentally increasing or decreasing. We want to have the same amount of stitches on every single row. And once you've done that, you can fasten off. Honestly, I'm not really sure what I'm pointing to here, but this is what I've done so far. My work is measuring 21.5 inches because I'm making the size small. Now we're going to get started on the back panel. Now the back panel is very similar to the front panel, but there is a slight difference. So again, we're going to start off with our slip knot and we're going to loosely make a chain. Once you have that chain, you need to single crochet in the second chain from the hook and then all the way across. And then we're going to chain 1, turn the work, single crochet in the next stitch and then in every stitch across. And then you just need to repeat that until your work measures however much it says on the screen. So it is the same as the front panel, but there's just a few more stitches on each row. Once you've done that, you can fasten off again and then it's time to go on to the sleeves. Now you need to make 2 sleeves the same. We're going to start off the same as we have on every bit so far. We're going to loosely chain and then it's going to be the exact same thing again. So you're going to single crochet in the second chain from the hook and then along, and then row 2 you're going to chain 1, turn your work, single crochet along and keep repeating that until your work measures however much it says on the screen. You want to do 2 sleeves the exact same. So here is an example of what your sleeve should look like, basically the same as the front and the back panels but just on a smaller scale. So by now you should have 4 separate pieces. We have the back panel, the front panel and then the 2 sleeves. Okay, so we're going to start off with the front panel and the back panel. Have the right sides facing downwards if you know the right side from the wrong side. It doesn't really matter if you don't. And then what we're going to do is place the edges of the rows so that they're against each other. So I'm just arranging them and then I'll show you what I mean. So from our point of view, the stitches are running horizontally, and so you want to make sure that yours is looking the same. And it's the edges of the rows that are touching each other from each panel. So make sure you haven't got them this way round is basically what I'm saying there. You need to make sure that yours looks the same as mine. The stitches are running horizontally from the way that we're looking at it right now. Now I'm just placing a stitch marker in the corners of the 2 panels and joining them together. And then I'm going to grab my measuring tape, and from that stitch marker I'm just going to measure inwards 5 inches. Now you can see here I'm not actually measuring 5 inches, I've done 2.5, but it wasn't quite enough. So I would recommend you measure in 5 inches, mark that with your stitch marker, and then we're just going to join the front and the back panel together in between those stitch markers. So we're just going to close up that gap. You can use a crochet hook or you can use your yarn needle. I'm going to use my yarn needle and I'm just using one of the tails to sew up that gap rather than getting new yarn, but it's totally up to you. And obviously you can see that my gap is not 5 inches. I'll say it again, I only measured 2.5 inches here. That is why the gap looks small, so yours should be looking bigger than this. So the good thing about mohair is that you don't need to be very good at seaming to pull it off. So I'm just working my way along that gap, nice and easy. And then once you get to your stitch marker, you can just fasten the yarn. To do that, I like to insert my needle, leave a little loop, not pull all the way through, and then just kind of fasten it like that. And then I'll probably add another little knot in there as well, just to make sure it's totally secure. And then as I was trying to show you my nice neat edge, I realised that there is a gap here, so I just quickly got another piece of yarn to close up that gap as well. And here is the seam. That is what the inside will look like, and then this is the outside. Okay, so now we just need to do the exact same thing again. We need to measure in 5 inches on the other side. Mark it out with your stitch markers and then grab your yarn and your yarn needle or your crochet hook and just close up that gap that's in between the stitch markers. So now the shoulder seams are complete. We have our front and back joined together and you should have quite a large neck opening. So we need to lay our work out flat and you want the seams that you've just done. So when I said that you had the inside of the seam and then the outside of the seam, you want the inside to be the bit you can see. So the bit that's facing up, because otherwise all the seams will be different and then you won't have like an inside and an outside, if that makes sense. So just lay the work out flat. Then you need to get one of your sleeves and place it right side facing down if you've been doing that so far. And again, you need the edges of the rows to be up against the body of the jumper. And I'm just measuring my sleeve to make sure that it's even on both sides. So my sleeve measures 12.75 inches and half of that is around 6.4 inches. So from the shoulder seam that we just did, I'm just measuring 6.4 inches either side so that the sleeve sits directly in the center. Then I'm just going to secure the sleeve to the main body with my stitch markers. And then again, we're going to close up the gap that is between the stitch markers. So we're going to sew along that gap either again with the sewing needle or the crochet hook. So I'm just doing that the same as I have been doing so far, and don't you just wish it was this fast? Once you've done that, you need to do the same sleeve the other way. I will quickly show you. There is my first sleeve all attached. You can hopefully see that it's quite even on each side of the shoulder seam, and that bulky seam is on the inside. It's facing up towards us, the same as what we did for the shoulder seams. And then when we turn the work over, the seam will be a lot more tidy, and that will be the way that you wear your jumper, so that bit will be shown on the outside. I really hope that makes sense. It's really hard to explain. So now I'm just taking my other sleeve and doing the exact same again. I'm going to measure it out so that everything is nice and even. And then we're going to close up that gap between the stitch markers. Here is what it should look like once you've done that. Grab your work from the shoulder seams and we're going to place the jumper down and kind of arrange it so that it would look the way it would when it's finished. We still want those bulky seams facing outwards and we want the right sides facing inwards if you've been doing that up to this point. Okay, now you need to grab a measuring tape and a stitch marker. Now we're going to measure from the armpit down the body, and then when you get to just over halfway, you're going to place a stitch marker. So I think mine from the armpit down measured 16. So then about 8.5 inches down, I just placed my stitch marker through the front and the back panels. That is going to indicate where our side split begins, and then you just need to do the exact same on the other side. Make sure you measure it and that everything is nice and even, and obviously as well make sure that the back panel is roughly 2 inches longer than the front panel. So I'm just measuring that and then placing the stitch marker. Okay, and now what we need to do is start from the wrist and we're going to seam up towards the armpit and then down to the stitch marker all in one go. And obviously we need to do that on both sides. So I'm starting from the wrist. Make sure you start from the wrist, go up to the armpit and then down to the stitch marker. If you want your side split to be bigger, then you need to move your stitch marker up higher. And if you want your side split to be not as big, then you need to move your stitch marker down a little bit. Now I'm just going to grab my project and my yarn needle and just start working away on that the exact same as we have been doing up to this point so far. So here is the inside of the seam. That's the side split with the body, and then this is the sleeve. Everything is all joined up, and like I said before, that chunky seam is going to be on the inside when we're finished. Now we need to do the exact same thing again on the other side. So you should already have your stitch marker placed. Just grab your yarn and do the exact same thing again from the wrist up to the armpit and then down to the stitch marker. When you've done that, weave in your ends and turn your work right side out. And that is it. Well done, guys. If you finish this jumper, really well done. Thank you so much for watching the video. Don't forget to tag me on socials. I really want to see your finished pieces, and like the video if you enjoyed it. Subscribe for more tutorials from me, but enjoy the rest of your day or night whenever you're watching this.